Hi everyone, it's Emma and welcome to my March wrap-up. It's too windy outside today, it's such a shame, I'm gutted. I wanted to go and sit somewhere nice, but nah. Anyway, so the first book that I read this month was The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Now this book was recommended by a friend. I knew absolutely nothing about it other than what's written on the back. It says, "I have stolen princesses back from sleeping Barrow kings. I burned down the town of Trubon. I have spent the night with Felurian and left with both my sanity and my life. I was expelled from the university at a younger age than most people are allowed in. I tread paths by moonlight that others fear to speak of during day. I have talked to gods, loved women, and written songs that make the minstrels weep. My name is Quoth. You may have heard of me." I enjoyed this book. It's long, it's something like 700 pages. So yeah, I had no preconceptions about this and just dived in to see what it was like. I've actually had this book for a few years, but had so many books in my TBR that I never got around to this. Now, it's very slow moving, very atmospheric, and I love that about it. And I had no idea that it's part of a series. So it was only when I was kind of halfway through and thinking nothing's happened that I realised that there must be more books after this. So that would be my criticism really, is that not an awful lot happens in the book. Really, it's mostly just this main character, this guy called Quoth, going to university. The world that's built in it is very believable. I just found it perhaps a little bit too slow. I would like to read the others, but I'm not going to rush out to pick them up. It's not a desperate, I must know what happens. It's a, if I see them, I'd read them. So I liked it. I didn't love it. I wasn't amazed by it. I decided that if there is a theme to the books I'm reading, that I'm going to add that to the name of my wrap-up. And I decided to call my March wrap-up Death and Music, because most of the books that I read this month have one of those themes. This one is largely music. So this main character plays lute, and the descriptions of how he feels about being a musician, how he feels about music, the way that the main character talks about being on stage and how important music is to him and how evocative it is of memories and things like that, is also something that I enjoyed reading as somebody who plays music. So I would give this 4 out of 5 stars. It was good. I didn't skim read it despite its length. Well written, imaginative, but I'm not in a rush to get another one because it was so slow moving. Even though it's like the slow moving was good and bad, because it created the atmosphere but also meant that I'm a bit nah. Second book I read this month is Terry Pratchett's Soul Music. Now on the Terry Pratchett Facebook page, they've been doing a reread of lots of his books, and they were reading, I think it was Guards in January, and I was seeing all these quotes come up and people talking about the books, and I thought, oh, I want to read a Terry Pratchett. I haven't read one for ages, and I fancied reading something that I don't actually have on my shelf. And so I went online and went to buy Guards, and this one came up in the suggested books. Now, I have read this before. I had a copy of this when I was a teenager, and I think actually it was my dad's copy, because our Terry Pratchett books were always very fluid and we'd borrow them off of each other. And I think what happened is I gave it back to him, so I haven't read it since my teens. And it was always one of my favourites. Death is my favourite character, as is many other people, so there we go, there's the death theme, and in fact also the music theme. I find this book very nostalgic, and I also loved the fact that now that I play in a band, that this makes this even funnier. It's so perceptive about, I don't know, just rock and roll and the nature of musicians, and yeah, it was funny, it was light reading. It only took me a couple of days to read it. I've loved this for a long time. I would give this one 4 stars too, because it's a great book. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I have read it before. I did buy one of the old copies secondhand because this matches the other ones. I've got the old paperbacks, so it's really, really faded, like lots of them are, just because their age, but I don't care. For anybody who's unfamiliar, the book is about Death Gets Depressed, is one half of the narrative, and then the other is about this rock and roll band. The back says, "Other children get given xylophones. Susan just had to ask her grandfather to take his vest off. Yes, there's a death in the family. It's hard to grow up naturally when grandfather rides a white horse and wields a scythe, especially when you have to take over the family business and everyone mistakes you for the Tooth Fairy, and especially when you have to face the new and addictive music that has entered Discworld. It's lawless, it changes people. It's called music with rocks in. It's got a beat and you can dance to it, but it's alive and it won't fade away." So very, very cool, and particularly the drummer, Cliff, is just... Next this month I read The House by Simon Lelik. This is a thriller. This does not fit the theme of this month. Well, I suppose it does, in that, you know, people die. This is my book club book this month. I'm in a mum's reading group that we affectionately nickname Snack Club because we eat far more snacks than we talk about books. We barely talk about books, to be fair, we mostly just eat snacks. This is our book this month. And it says on the back, the perfect couple, the perfect house, the perfect crime. Jack and Sid moved into the house a year ago. It seemed like their dream home, tons of space, the perfect London location, and a friendly owner who wanted a young couple to have it. So when they made a grisly discovery in the attic, Jack and Sid chose to ignore it. That was a mistake, because someone had just been murdered outside their back door, and now the police are watching them. It was alright. I mean, I read it pretty quickly. It's been in the BBC Radio 2 book club, and I know that the lady who chooses the books for our book club quite often does pick the ones from that list, and generally they have been quite good. This one, I just felt like I didn't really care about the characters, and it reminded me in a way of something like a Point Horror or a Goosebumps book, where it's like, ooh, the spooky house, and ooh, there's a strange smell, and I was like, really? And I think by the time it got to the end and you find out the answers to everything, I was just a bit kind of underwhelmed. So, you know, I would say it started off well and was reasonably atmospheric. I had issues with the way that it was written as sort of letters between the two characters to each other, because it gets to a point where it doesn't quite work, because the timeline gets a little bit confusing. I give this 3 stars because it was alright, it was readable, but I saw the end come in and wasn't that bothered about the characters. The Book Thief. Now this, again, we've got the death theme and the music theme in this one. Here is a small fact: you're going to die. 1939, Nazi Germany, the country is holding its breath. Death has never been busier. Liesel, a 9-year-old girl, is living with a foster family on Himmel Street. Her parents have been taken away to a concentration camp. Liesel steals books. This is her story and the story of the inhabitants of her street when the bombs begin to fall. I picked this up in a book haul from a charity shop, and I literally only picked it up because I kind of liked the cover. I liked the fact it was narrated by Death, and I'd heard of it. That's basically my criteria. I kind of, let's try that. And when I put it on my Instagram, a few people said, oh, that's my favourite book, I love that. You know, let me know if you enjoy it, that kind of thing. So I thought, oh, well, I must read that pretty quick. In particular, what I liked about this book is the way that things are described. There isn't masses of detail given about particular individuals or situations. I mean, one of the characters, for example, is described as having a cardboard face. And that's it, you're not given any more detail. And I love that kind of description. It reminded me in that respect of using unusual adjectives, of Jandy Nelson's I'll give you the sun, I'll bring you the sun. Anyway, which also is very, very visual, but without giving a lot of detail. In that one, it talks about how one of the main characters, her hair is like taking over the room. And I just love when it's unusually described. And to me, I'm a very visual person, and that was all I needed to then create these images in my head, and that they were actually far more fleshed out by just one word than they would have been given loads and loads of detail. I particularly liked the character of Mama in this because she's, I think, very cleverly multifaceted, because she's rude, unkind, abusive. I think maybe in many ways you're supposed to not like her very much, but actually she has such a warm heart, and the way that that's written so that actually, despite her meanness, you really love her. I think that's very clever. Papa is obviously just a gorgeous character. The end had me crying, except I was in public, so I had to like hold it in, so maybe I didn't feel the end as much because I had to kind of tone it down a little bit. I would give this 4.5 stars because I really, really liked it, but I would not put it amongst my favourite books. It just didn't, I can't even tell you why, but it just didn't really hit me in my heart the way that I hoped it did, but it is fantastic and I would thoroughly recommend it because it's unusual. And quite often in this story you are told what's going to happen before it happens, which is unusual. Death tells you, you know, oh, this person died or whatever before they do, and then you get the story of it, which I think is really clever. But yeah, would recommend it. Not going to be one of my top books, but it's like high up there. Oh, and also, as I said, this also has a music theme because there are several accordion players in here, and there's lots of talk about music, and again about it being very evocative and reminding certain characters of their parents and things like that. And so yeah, again, the description of music is beautiful. So we're now up to, well, in fact, all of those books had either death or music or both. Final one doesn't have either. So my last book that I read this month is The Book of Tides. This is the third copy of this that I bought. I saw it in a little kind of boutique-y shop and fell in love with just the look of the book. So the cover's beautiful, it's a hardback version, and then inside each page has these gorgeous illustrations. When I saw it in the shop, it's quite expensive. The cover price is £20, but I got it cheaper online. It's a bit rude, isn't it? But anyway. So I bought this as presents for some friends, and then this copy I've just bought for my dad, who I will have given it to him before I make this video. And my dad and I have an agreement between us that when we buy each other books, we read them first. I've always had that agreement. I actually don't know if it goes the other way. I don't care. I read it. Sorry, Dad. I thought it was going to take a while. I read this in about an hour. It's really, really interesting. You've got the chapters are tide, stream, rapids, whirlpool, tsunami, bore, wave and rip, and for each of those chapters it explains what those phenomena are and then gives some details about kind of water sports and coastal life around those. I think the guy who wrote this, well, I know the guy who wrote this is a surfer, so there's a lot about surfing, whereas I'm a scuba diver, so I'm more interested in that side of things, but that didn't detract for me. I think that artistically it's beautiful, there's an awful lot of information packed in, it's a quick read, and in general loved it, and I would give it 4 stars. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my March wrap up. I would actually recommend all of these books, so any of these that you fancy, read them, they're all good. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, please subscribe for more videos like this one, please leave me comments below about what you've been reading this month, or if you've read any of these and how you feel about them. And I will see you all again soon. Bye!